since I came. Something like, no, it was September. Last September, yeah. Almost a year. Yeah. So they asked me to speak on a verse from the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. And this chapter is entitled, The Most Confident... No, this is not the chapter. It's a different chapter. 327 is the verse, right? Is that correct? 327, yeah. Okay. This is called Karma Yoga. If we're doing Bhakti Yoga, but we're going to talk about Karma. So, anyway, it's all part of the Gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
This is verse number 27, which is an often quoted verse. Let's see, do we have... Can you follow along? I'll make it easy so you can follow. Prakritir guna sam... No, let me see. No, that's not it. That's chapter 27 is... Prakriti kriyamanani.
Prakriti kriyamanani.
Gunai karmani sarvasyaha.
Gunai karmani sarvasyaha.
Ahankara vimuratma.
Ahankara vimuratma.
Kartaham iti manyate.
Kartaham iti manyate.
Prakrite kriyamanani.
Prakriti kriyamanani.
Gunai karmani sarvasyaha.
Gunai karmani sarvasyaha.
Ahankara vimuratma.
Ahankara vimutatma.
Kartaham iti manyate.
Kartaham iti manyate.
So I'll just read the translation. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of the false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. So we'll read it again. The spirit soul, the living being actually, bewildered by the influence of the idea of ahankara. Ahankara means false ego. That means misidentification with the self as something different than pure spirit. Thinks himself the doer of the activities, but actually they're carried out by the three modes of material nature. So material nature has three different categories of activity. So Srila Prabhupada's purport: two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there's a wide gulf of difference in their respective positionings. The persons in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independent, and that is the symptom of his ignorance. He does not know that the gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of God, and as such his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesha, or the master of the senses of the material body, for due to his long misuse of the senses and sense gratification, he is actually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. Chaksun militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Devasesa Sunyavadi Vasyatya Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Radha
Gaura Bhakta
Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
So this verse is very difficult to understand, because when one performs an activity, they get a particular result. And based on that result, they think that that result is produced by the activity that they perform. And that's called ahankara. Ahankara means something different than who you actually are. In me, false ego is everything that we identify with as ourself other than our real identity. In other words, we can go down the list of what is ahankara. We think I'm a man, we think I'm a woman, we think I'm from a particular culture or nation. We identify ourselves with a particular society, country, nation, activities. Even in terms of our personal situation, we describe ourselves as old, young, learned, not so learned, student, whatever. These are all listings of something that is based on the body, and not on you. And these things change in the course of our activities in the world, and therefore they're not real in the sense that they are temporary. They're real in the sense they exist, but they're not real in the sense that they identify who we really are in any particular situation. It's just a label that comes and goes. It's like the cloud in the sky is in a particular situation, then when the wind comes, that same cloud is blown to another place. And so we move through different identities as we go from life after life, and even within this life. And all of these different identities are what we say superfluous, or not actually identifying who we actually are. We are pure spirit beings. But as pure spirit beings, we take on a material body as we come into this world, and we perform activities based on the body. And then we get a particular results based on that. So then we think that because I'm acting in a certain way or thinking in a certain way, we're getting a particular result. But here it says that actually we're not the doer. So who is actually doing anything? The thing is, we have one particular unique principle of our existence, and that is called desire. Desire is the nature of life. Now, desire is the basic principle that brings about activities based on that particular desire. So, everyone, of course, the ultimate desire in this world and everywhere is to be happy. And people find happiness in different ways, based on the body, the mind, the intelligence, the senses, and whatever else goes on as some created idea of life or happiness. And in working in such a way, we get a particular result. But how we work and what is the basis of our desire, the motivation behind our desire, we get a particular result. Therefore, we get the results that are coming outside of ourselves and not based on our own activity. Which means that all we can do is desire. And desire is not static. Desire motivates one to perform an activity. But based on the quality of the desire, the activity produces a certain result. So in the category of results, there's three categories. The mode of, we call it the mode of ignorance, or activities which are detrimental to oneself and to others. That's called the mode of ignorance. Harmful activities, sinful activities, activities that really are based on ignorance. For instance, intoxication, illicit activities, excessive sleep, madness. It's a Sanskrit word which means a particular category which gives you a result based on the quality of your activities, which is fortified by your desire. That makes sense? So, and then of course, if we have a little bit of a better desire, we want to gain something in the right way materially. We want to get a nice house, we want to get a nice family, we want to get some money, we want to get a good job, we want to get some education, and like that. That's the mode of passion. So we work according to the rules and regulations that govern these activities, and that mode of passion gives you a particular results accordingly. So it's not that you're going to get exactly the same result as everyone else is going to give, even though you might have the same desire. We can see two people work in the same way. For instance, two people go to university. You can say that, maybe that's pretty much common here. People go to universities. And one person hardly even studies and graduates top class, and another person studies all the time and can't even get, hardly passes. So you might say, well, that person is more intelligent or something. Get a particular type of results from your activity. Even if you don't try for it, you'll get it. And if you're not destined, if you try for it, you won't get it. So there's a certain destiny that is called our karma. Karma means that our actings and reactions as we accumulate these things lead us to a certain set of results accordingly, and then we act and don't act based on what kind of activity we perform, or what kind of results we get. Now, higher than that is the mode of goodness. That means the activities that want to be beneficial for people in general. Giving in charity to help people who are suffering, putting yourself in a position to sacrifice your own conveniences for the benefits of others. We may not say it. Opening hospitals, feeding the poor, working for the welfare, maybe even for one's community or nation or country, like that. Now, this is more altruistic type of activity. It's more selfless. Their happiness is based on what happiness and benefit they can give to others. That's the highest of the three modes of material nature. Like that. It's more selfless. The mode of passion is more selfish. It's in line with normal material activities, but still it is motivated by self-interest, where ignorance is simply destructive. Now, all of these activities are producing a particular result. Now here it's mentioned that one thinks mistakenly that because I'm acting in a certain way, I'm the person who's doing it. But then again, if you look at an activity, and this is explained in another place in the Bhagavad-gita, there's many ingredients that make up a particular activity. Just like, for instance, if you want to eat, but there's no food, you can't eat. The food has to be there before you can eat. So you require something from the outside in order to fulfill a particular desire. That's just a simple analogy. But in the Bhagavad-gita it says that there's 5 factors of activity. One is the endeavor, the emphasis you put into it, the effort you make in. Another one is the time, place, and circumstance by which you're working. The third one is the ingredients that you use in order to make things happen or not happen. And the fourth is and the fifth is actually, the sanction of the Supreme Lord. He gives sanction to something or not sanction to something. Sometimes we say, oh, well, people say, well, you got some good luck. But it's not really good luck. It may be either one's good karma, or it may be the blessings of the Lord, either one. Or if it doesn't happen, you may say, well, it's bad luck, or it's just, the Lord didn't give you any mercy. So there are many ingredients which make an act. So we are 1/5 of every activity we perform, and everything else is part of that activity. So that's why this verse says, you think you're the doer, but actually all of these other elements make up the action itself. And unless the Lord, through the material energy, for those who are trying to achieve something material, gives the results, then that result doesn't come according to what you desire. It comes in a different way, or no result at all. And then, of course, those who are performing activities in relationship to the Lord, in other words, devotional service, the results are given by Krishna directly. So the Lord is there in both cases, but one is indirect and one is direct. So, but our business is to somehow connect with the Supreme Lord, because then all of our activities become satisfying, sources of happiness, awareness of our real identity, and it establishes a relationship with the Supreme Lord. In other words, the platform of happiness, where material activities cannot guarantee anything. In fact, sometimes people really set out to do something and they get the complete opposite result. It happens all the time. Just the way the world works. Because they weren't destined, or they might not use the right ingredient. In other words, something was missing in order to fulfill that desire that they wanted to fulfill. But in devotional service, when you serve the Lord, no matter what the results are, it's beneficial. This is the difference between material activities and spiritual activities. Spiritual activities always connect you with God and awaken within you the idea of actually, I'm sorry, not idea, but your identity is something different than this material body. In other words, your spiritual awareness. So everything is auspicious when we say beneficial, when we perform activities for the Lord, because He doesn't depend on the quality of the results. He simply depends on your enthusiasm in the activity, that's all. But you could be very enthusiastic in material activities and you can still go to hell. But in spiritual activities, it's auspicious because it's not based on those three categories: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Therefore, when we engage in devotional service, even if we have material desires and we engage in devotional service, if the Lord is pleased by our efforts in devotional service, He will also show us how to fulfill our personal needs on a material level also. He gives you that intelligence. He says, I am the intelligence of the intelligent. So He works in both categories to fulfill our desires, both material and spiritual. So it's not that we approach the Lord to fulfill something material, but it comes automatically by His grace. So those who serve the Lord have no personal want, because the Lord provides everything. It's just like in a family, when the child obeys the parent will do everything they can to give that child whatever they need to grow nicely, and if the child has certain feelings or desires, the parent is eager to fulfill that, because they're following the parent nicely. But those who don't want to serve the Lord, who want to serve the material energy independently, without that, then they have to struggle. And they may or may not, usually may not find the satisfaction they're looking for, because material energy is still those three categories: goodness, passion, ignorance, which the word guna means mode or category, and guna has a second meaning which means rope. And the rope has a tendency to bind one, or to tie one up. So our activities in the material world are always limited and fraught with so many problems. And there's no guarantee of any result. Just like, I'll give you an example. This is a statistic. In the United States of America, they have this thing called a lottery. Maybe they have it in other countries also. When you go into a particular store, you put $1 or $2 down, and they give you a particular ticket with a number on it. Then they have a drawing, and then if they pick your number, you win a large amount of money. And sometimes it's like $5 million, $8 million, sometimes it's so high. And many people, all of a sudden, their whole life changed. They won a large amount of money. But does that mean that they're going to all of a sudden be happy now? Because whatever you have in life, if it doesn't bring you happiness, it's useless. So then they get a follow-up kind of, statistic to find out what happened to people who won these lotteries. What was their life like after? How did it change? And most of them had more problems than they ever had before. Why? Because their karma was not to get that kind of enjoyment from that kind of benediction. They were still under the influence of karma. So many of them took to, sinful activities, licentiousness, drunkenness, all kinds of things that were detrimental to themselves. Many of their friends and relatives became very interested in them because now they had money. So now who's your real friend then? Your friend of your money, that's the most of you. So the statistics show that most of these people who won apparently thought, wow, my life's nice. And life went down. Because life is not external, it's internal. External is an expression of what's internal. If it's not there inside, it's not there outside. One can make a show of what goes on outside, but if there's not satisfaction and fulfillment on the inside, then all of our show is just what it is. It's a show. But that satisfaction comes by serving the Lord. When we serve the Lord, this is called karma yoga here. This is the beginning of the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna teaches different types of yoga to Arjuna, who's asking various questions. And this is the basic principle. Karma yoga means I do something, and I keep some of the results for myself, and I give some of the results to the Lord. In other words, I sacrifice some of the results, and I make it as an offering to the Lord. Karma yoga helps one to come to the platform of bhakti yoga, which is devotion to Krishna, which is the goal of activities. And that's mentioned in the 6th chapter of this Bhagavad-gita, where Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesham madhuten atmanam stradavam bhajate yomam te yate me yuktatamam mataha. He who abides in me, worship me in transcendental faith, is most intimately united with me and is the highest of all. So he explains that of all the types of yoga, he explains karma yoga, jnana yoga, raja yoga, and of course the Ashtanga yoga system is also mentioned. He culminates in bhakti yoga as being the highest. And bhakti simply means to serve the Lord for the pleasure of the Lord under the guidance of the Lord's pure devotee, the spiritual master, who teaches one how to serve the Lord in such a way. When we follow that path, we are actually coming back to who we are. People in this world don't know who they are. They think they're the body, or they think they're something in relationship to the body. Nobody knows who they are. Because it says, who are we? Jiva Suvai Krishna Nityadas. Our real identity is that we are an eternal servant of the Lord. We don't take birth, we don't die, and everything that happens to us in the material world doesn't happen to us actually. It happens to the body, mind, and senses. What has happened, for instance, just like you dream at night. We all have dreams, right? And sometimes you see yourself in the dream. Have you had that experience? You have a dream, and you're seeing yourself in the dream. But who's seeing, and who's being seen? Who's that guy in the dream that's being looked at by the guy in the dream also? So one of them is you, and the other one is your conception of yourself. In the dream is your conception of yourself, and the person that is seeing is actually the soul viewing itself in its identity as material life. So then in that particular state of consciousness, which is a more subtle state of consciousness, one can separate themselves from themselves and see themselves in a different way. At least understand that I'm seeing myself, but I'm not actually seeing who I am. I'm the seer, but I'm not the person being seen, although it seems like the same person. Did that make sense? Yeah, so this is just an example by which way we can understand we're something different than this material body. And that's the basis, and I use that with emphasis, that's the basis of knowledge. When you know you're not who you think you are on the external level. It's just like, I mean, we have many examples. You're driving in your car, and you know, some people got a Mercedes-Benz, somebody's got a Fiat, somebody's got a broken down Ford. So different cars. So we see in this world people have different bodies. Some bodies are more high energy, others are just managing to somehow go along different categories of bodies. But if something happens to the body, we say, oh, it happens to me, but actually it doesn't. It's happening to your body, just like when you drive a car. If something happens to the car, say you have an accident, you might, all right, just say somehow you have an accident, but it's the car that gets damaged generally, and you're all right because you're not you're in the car, but you're not the car. So what happens to the body don't have to happen to us. And this is one way to overcome difficulties in this world, when we realize that everything that is happening to us is not happening to me directly. But because we have a certain value system that we're trying to fulfill, we become unhappy when we don't fulfill our needs in this world, or our desires in this world. But if we want to overcome that and come to a stage of real knowledge, then taking up devotional service to the Lord is the actual process, because then we go above the body, above these three categories, into this is called transcendental. The word dental means material, and trans means to go above the material, transcendental. That means perform activities that are on the spiritual platform. And then we connect ourselves, who we really are, with the Supreme Self. And although the body and mind are acting, they're not being affected by the three modes of material nature. They're under the care of Krishna directly, because as soon as we serve the Lord, then he takes care of us directly. If we refuse to serve the Lord, he takes care of us by putting us under the care of the three modes of material nature. It's almost like when you live in the state, if you're a good citizen, you get all the benefits of the state. But if you break the law, then you have to get the benefits of living in the prison, which is also controlled by the state. So Krishna is the controller of both material and spiritual. But when we engage in devotional service to the Lord, we're actually on the spiritual platform. And that means we're raising our consciousness. Because consciousness is actually life. Some people say, well, what is life? Just like the scientists, they say, well, life starts at a certain combination of chemicals at a certain level of development. But they haven't been able to do that. Life is actually separate from everything material. And everything material is given life by the touch of something spiritual. Just like, what's the example? As soon as, well, that's a nice example. I won't use that one. But what's an example? It's like, all right, so I'm trying to think of an example. How when something is touched by something spiritual, although it's material, it starts to also formulate activities based on that. And just like when life starts, how does life start? The life is there in the womb. The woman carries the womb, and in there is the formulation for the body. But it doesn't come alive until it's touched by spiritual energy. And that's when the man injects the semen. In that semen, there is a spirit soul that comes into the womb as soon as it comes in. That's how life starts. And then that activates the womb, and then the body starts to formulate. It doesn't happen ahead of time. So, yeah, that's how living entities come into life. From the male sperm comes and fertilizes the ovum or the embryo, and then life begins. But that basis of life is still there in its dormant stage, but because it's not touched by spirit, it doesn't activate. I guess that's the best example I can think of. But ultimately, as soon as we connect ourselves with the Lord in devotional service, we start to awaken our spiritual consciousness. Otherwise, spiritual consciousness is there, but it's covered. It's never lost. We actually say we're never separated from God, ever. But it's just like if you're in two rooms with a wall dividing, you're not connected with that other person, but you know the other person's there. Although you may have a relationship, you can't really access that relationship because of the wall. As soon as you break down the covering, the relationship becomes aware. We become aware of that relationship. So we're always connected with the Lord. We cannot be separated from the Lord at all, because that's our nature. But we're covered by this material energy. So devotional service is the means by getting out of that covering and bringing us back to our natural consciousness, which is eternality. We don't die. Death is an illusion. Everyone's afraid of death, but there's no such thing as death, because the soul is never born. If something is never born, it never dies either. It's eternal. God is eternal. We are also eternal. So when life starts in the body at a certain point, and then when the body starts to wear out, gets old, and no longer functions, we call that death. But the soul is never influenced by either birth or death, because the soul is always alive. So ultimately, we say the body is never alive and the soul is always alive. So when you leave this body, you will at some point, you call that death, you go somewhere else, that's all. Then the question is where you want to go. And that depends on what we do in this life. So if we engage in service to the Lord, and we awaken our spiritual consciousness, then that connection with the service to the Lord brings us in contact with the Lord. And if we perfect that service in devotion, then we go back to the spiritual world. And we understand when we actually experience our eternal life, which is free from all of these changes that come by way of living in this world. And that's the perfection of existence. But even if we start and somehow or other get some connection with the Lord and perform some devotional service, even if we don't finish in this life, even if we have to come back in another life, we don't come back from where we left, from point zero. We start from where we left off. So whatever devotion you do to the Lord, it's like money in the bank. It stays. So you pick up in your next life where you left off in the previous life. And it becomes cumulative. And if you continue that way, ultimately you reach perfection. Okay. Whereas material activities, what happens? You do something, you're very successful on the material level, and then when death comes, it's all gone, it's finished. Nothing is ever kept in material life. The spiritual life is cumulative, and it's not under the influence of these three categories. So take up devotional service, and the more you take up devotional service, the more you will experience who you are, and because you are perfect. Everyone is a pure, spiritual, perfect being. But we experience imperfection because we live based on the activities of the body. So if we read the Bhagavad-gita, chant the holy names of the Lord, associate with devotees in this environment of understanding the spiritual practices, take spiritual food offered to the Lord is called prasada, worship the Lord in His deity form. All of these things raise the consciousness towards our eternal consciousness, and that's success. That's success, because that's our what we're talking about is something who you are. We're not saying this is something you have to achieve separate. It's not. All you have to do is bring it out. It's already there. Your perfection lies within you. You just have to bring it out. And this is the process of bringing it out, is the process of serving the Lord in devotion. And we mentioned the activities that bring it out, especially the chanting of Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
That's what we say, fast track. When you go to the airport, there's a certain place it's called fast track. We like that road. Less hassle. So that's the fast track, the chanting of the holy name. If we develop a taste for that chanting, and there is a taste, there's a very sweet taste that comes as we practice chanting the holy name and learn how to associate with and also develop an attitude of service in contact with other devotees like that. These two things are the most important. Associating and serving devotees and chanting Hare Krishna, and then of course reading books and taking prasadam, that's all part of the whole package. It's a very nice susukam kartam avyayam. The Bhagavad-gita says it's joyful. Our material activities, you get a little success, you become happy, and then after some time you find it's gone, and then you got to keep try to bring it back again somehow. Okay, so there's much to say on this particular topic, so I'll stop. Anyone would like to add comment, question, anything in relationship to this particular topic, which is very basic? Yes.
Thank you for the nice lecture, Maharaj. So you mentioned that we are not this body, and it takes time to realize. But we are not this mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do we understand that? Because the desire is the sitting place, the mind is the sitting place of the desire.
Yeah.
The soul is desiring. So how do we understand?
Well, the soul is the sitting place of the desire. The desires come out through the mind. The mind is the means for receiving and offering the activities of our desires, that's all. So, how to see the mind as being separate? Well, I use that example of a dream, that helps a little bit. But because we're always actively using our mind, we get so much connected with the mind, that when we say, well, yes, our body is different than who we are, it becomes a little easier to understand, practical. But the mind is, because it's more subtle. The more subtle something is, the less perceivable it is also. And even less subtle than that is the false ego, the sense of identity. So, how to see the mind? We have the whole Bhagavad-gita, the chapter 6 is how to control the mind. It says, well, we have to use the mind. We can't neglect the mind. There is a class of spiritualists that say, you shouldn't perform any activities. You should just meditate. You should just study scripture or do some sacrifice like that. But that's not the program, because you can't stop the activities of the mind. You just have to bring it to the spiritual platform. That's all. You're bringing it to the spiritual platform. Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gita, one should elevate themselves by the mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and the enemy as well. So we're sitting right next to our best friend and worst enemy, the mind. So controlling the mind and directing the mind is the whole process of bhakti. So when we have a particular desire that we want to fulfill, we focus our mind on that. So the idea is to understand that the perfection of desire is to desire self-realization. So focus on those activities that help bring about self-realization. And that, we say, purifies the mind and directs the mind towards the soul. Yeah, you can't give up the activities of the mind. It's not possible. You just have to use it in the right way, in a beneficial way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. We'll go one man, one lady. We're equal opportunity employers. One of the ladies can speak.
I'm just a translator.
Oh, okay.
So Mataji is asking by which signs she can understand that this spiritual master is her master, and that she really understands what he's saying, his instructions, and she really learns from him.
Well, in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, those who are engaged in pure devotional service, those who are empowered by Krishna to teach the science of bhakti, who have certain qualifications, they can be approached for spiritual guidance and knowledge also. And there's 3 ways. One, you should hear. Hearing is the process by which it awakens that desire for the spiritual master. So there are many in the category of spiritual master. So generally we hear from different people until we actually connect with that person who has an impact on us in such a way that we think, yes, I think this person is the person who can guide me in spiritual life. And that comes by the process of hearing. And hearing awakens questions. Because then questions come, we get our answers, if those answers are satisfying, and then that brings us closer to that spiritual person. So there's many we can hear from who are in the category to lead others. So when you're just beginning, you just kind of find a few persons who really inspire you. And then you keep hearing from them. Like that. And then the person who inspires you the most. Sometimes we say, that person who inspires you in such a way that you will be able to give your life to Krishna in devotion, that's your spiritual master. Many people will inspire you, but that person deeply inspires you. Deeply means, yes, there's no doubt. But questions should be there for clarifications, for understanding. Okay, is that okay? Okay. Yes, Prabhu, over here.
I have a question. Like, it is always said that we are not this body, but we are soul. So how can we realize this, and by what time we will know that we have realized this fact that we are not this body, but we are soul?
When we're acting on the bodily platform, we're reinforcing our consciousness that we are the body. When we act on the spiritual platform, we're awakening the soul. So the more we act on the spiritual platform, the more we become aware of our identity separate from the body. That's the first understanding. That idea of separate. Krishna in the very beginning of Bhagavad-gita takes 20 verses to explain the difference between the body and the soul. That whole beginning of the Bhagavad-gita, he sets the foundation for all the knowledge he gives later. Because unless one has that, at least theoretical understanding, that you're not the body, you can't understand this philosophy. Even if you don't have realized understanding, there's 2 levels of understanding. One's called Gyan, one's called Vigyan. Gyan means theoretical knowledge, Vigyan means realized knowledge. It's a difference. So Krishna gives us the theoretical knowledge in the beginning so we can begin to understand different aspects of our relationship with him, which helps to bring that Gyan to Vigyan, realization.
So first we have to go for Gyan, then we can go to Vigyan.
Well, that's how it starts. You can't jump to Vigyan.
Actually, acting on the spiritual platform means we have to increase our devotional service. First you told that we should act on spiritual platform, means we have to increase our devotional service.
Devotional service. But one of the fastest ways is chant Hare Krishna. It's Krishna, Lord Chaitanya's special mercy to awaken the soul through the process of chanting. And we actually experience something wonderful through the chanting. We can't even, sometimes we can't describe it, but we all of a sudden feel enlivened, happy. And that because the power of the chanting of the holy name goes directly to the soul and awakens it. It's like, I don't know how you can say, if you want to get medicine, you can take it in pills, but if they give it to you in injection, it's faster. So, Kirtan's injection, japa's pills. Both work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Maharaj, in this material world that we live in, we need to have a spiritual master to be able to progress in our spiritual life. But is it better to have a spiritual master and then not follow the rules? Or, I mean, because if you have a spiritual master and then you don't follow at least the 4 regulated principles, it's your guru who will actually take your...
Then although you have something valuable, you can't take advantage of it. It's like people who are misers. They have a lot of money, but they don't spend it. So they don't get the benefit of being rich because they just keep it in the bank. They keep looking at the numbers, that's all. It's a miser. So if you have the good fortune of coming in contact with the spiritual master, then that's the beginning of your good fortune. And by following, then that good fortune becomes realized. But if you don't follow, it's almost like not having it. It's the same thing. If you're going to take a spiritual master, why would you not follow? What's the use of taking when not following? Well, you might think, well, you have a wrong conception of taking the spiritual master. Then when you took it, you thought, oh, it's too difficult. I shouldn't follow. But then there's a process by which you evaluate taking a spiritual master. Usually it's 1 year. We hear from persons who we are inclined to follow for at least a year, minimum. Sometimes it's more. And that's the evaluation. Is this person my spiritual master? And then you're following the process at the same time. And you're getting a taste. But once you take the formal initiation, that consummates the relationship, and then you're under the direct mercy of Krishna, because Krishna works through the spiritual master. Yeah. So we might say, why take one if you're not going to follow? But give yourself enough preliminary to understand the importance of it and the duties that are. I have to understand what is my duties to my spiritual master. Don't just, Prabhupada used to say, those who come easy, they go easy. So it's not something we just jump into. Yes.
Maharaj, I have a question. You mentioned that kirtan is like injection and chanting is like pill. Like, should we more often make kirtans and harinams than chant? Like, what we should like?
Well, our process is to do both, because one also fortifies or inspires the other. So Lord Chaitanya is noted for his kirtan, but he also chanted japa too. Although we don't hear so much about his japa chanting, but it was there. He would chant on beats also. So to follow the standard that's given means to get the mercy or the benefit. So we do both. We might think, oh, kirtan's easier, it's more fun. But those who do japa and kirtan really taste kirtan. They really go through. It's not a fleeting experience, something that becomes part of them. So, japa is very nice if you give it a chance. It's a little more harder because Chanchalahi Mana Krishna. The mind is flickering and likes to run this way and that way. And that's a whole other subject, how to keep the mind connected to the sound. But when we practice that, we're successful to some degree. It awakens our desire for kirtan. Kirtan feeds japa, japa feeds. Because it's the same thing being performed in just two different moods. That's it. It's glorification of the Lord in both cases. Anything else? Yes, Mataji.
How to keep the mind connected to the sound?
How to keep the mind connected to?
To the sound.
To the soul?
Sound.
Sound.
Yes, what you just what we should do.
Practice. Prabhupada used to say, when one devotee asked him, Prabhupada, when I chant japa, I can't control my mind. Prabhupada said, what is this mind? Just forget about it, just hear. If the mind is dictating to you, just turn off the channel and go back to the sound, that's all. The mind will jump in, turn the channel off and go back to the sound. If you keep doing that, when you get connected to the sound in a more regulated way, it becomes easier for the mind to stay connected. Yeah, we all have that problem. Even great devotees have problems with keeping the mind connected, but if you practice, and another way is there's certain things in our life that should be aligned with our spiritual practice that will help us control the mind when we chant. Because chanting is not just a 2-hour performance, it's a 24-hour performance. How we live our life will also support or take away from the quality of our chanting. So that means, what does that mean? Is that to follow the rest of the process also, as given. So, yeah. Chanting is there, but chanting is not simply the only activity. It's the essence, but everything is supported by our activities throughout the day, our reading, our quality of relationships we have with other devotees will also affect the quality of our chanting. Our reading, our understanding, our worship, the qualities that we develop, tolerance, humility, simplicity, kindness towards all of these things help in developing proper consciousness, which comes out in the form of our chanting. So it's not, chanting is not simply something that's isolated from everything else. But while we're chanting, just to get back to that part, just don't listen to your mind. Just say, hey mind, I'll talk to you later, go away, I know you got a lot of problems, or you want to tell me something now, or you want to go somewhere else. All right, wait a while, and then I'll fulfill all your desires later. So you have to trick your mind. And then I'll say, oh, mind will say, sounds reasonable. So in the Bhagavad-gita it says one of the ways to control the mind is neglect. Don't listen to it. That's all. It'll come back. It's strong at the beginning, but the more you focus on the sound, and the more you don't give the mind the access it wants, the less power it has, and it gradually becomes less and less. And some days it's really like, climbing a big mountain. Some days it's more easier. And that's due to the atmosphere around us. So, but if you keep practicing, you'll be successful. Don't give up. That's all. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. The idea is not to give up, because success comes in time. Anything else? Okay, yes. Mhm.
Which is easy to control, the mind or the wind?
The mind or the wind?
Which is easy to control, the
What is
mind or the wind?
Krishna's, Arjuna said, he said, Arjuna, speaking to Krishna, Krishna tells him to control the mind. He says, Chanchalahi mana Krishna, pramati balavadrita, tasyaham vidunam maye, vayuridam siddhuskaram. That the mind is restless, turbulent, unsteady, O Krishna. And to control the mind means to control the wind. I think it's easier to control the wind than it is to control the mind. And Krishna agrees. He says, yes, in the next verse. But then he says, Abhyasena tu kunteya, vairagya chigriyate. Practice. Practice. And give up those things which cause the mind to become restless. In other words, material desires. Practice. So, yeah. Even great souls experience difficulties sometimes in controlling the mind. But they have the formula, and they know the process. Us, we struggle with that. So we know the formula when we apply it. That is, don't listen to your mind. Listen to the sound of the Holy Name. It's not easy. Nobody said it's easy. Nobody will say it's easy. But because the mind, see, the same mind we have has been with us since we came into the material world. Maya lavase, kacho vese, kacho habubuduai. Life after life after life, we're going from one material situation to another. We carry the same mind with us. Transmigration of the soul means the physical body dies and the subtle body, which is mind, intelligence, and false ego, carries the soul to the next material body. So we have the same mind life after life after life. That's why many people have dreams, and in their dreams they experience things they can't connect with in this life. A lot of them is due to previous lives. Yeah. So the mind is a very complicated feature. So, but if you work with it, you can gradually purify it. And the easiest way is to chant. If you chant as much as you can, not only on your beads, but whenever you can, then you're gradually bringing the mind under the control of the self, of the soul. In Bengal, they say, Hate koro kaje buki bohori. Hate koro kaje means work with your hands. Buki bohori means to chant the holy name. So even while you're doing ordinary activities, chant. And don't worry, you'll get your activities done. It's not like by chanting you can't function. No, you can actually function even more efficiently, even with our day-to-day activities. Because the holy name is not limited to anything material. It's the principle of broader consciousness, expanded consciousness. Okay, don't try to control the wind. It's not possible. But we should try to control the mind, and using the power of the mercy of God and the association of devotees who have. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Bhagavad Gita.
Jai.
Maharaj, would you like to start the...
Kirtan? Okay. Where's our drummer? Is he there? He's pretty good. Is there anyone else who would like to chant after me? if you chant, the prasadam tastes better.